Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Gold Shields, the brand new podcast for true crime lovers everywhere. I'm here, Dan Murphy, along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith.
Hey, Danny, how we doing today?
Doing great today. Could not be more excited about our guest. And before we talk with that guest, I just want to do a couple of quick pieces of business. First is to thank everyone who listened to our first kickoff episode. We have received so much. I know you have too, Tom. So much fantastic feedback. And we want the advice, too. Let us know what you want to listen to, because this is going to be a listener-directed podcast.
Yep, we thought about this, and we ended up being right with the feedback that we got on all our social media platforms about the first show and this coming show. The feedback's incredible, and we can't thank everybody enough for getting on Spotify, for getting on Apple, and all the feedback on LinkedIn is incredible. So thank you for everyone listening, and continue to do so.
Yep. Thanks for your support. And tell a friend. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to tell them that this is going to be a better show than what they're used to. That's our goal. We want to bring you quality, great content, terrific guests, keep your attention, educate you, maybe make you laugh along the way, make you think, and make your time well spent. In line with that, I want to quickly thank our sponsors, T&R Investigations, comprehensive investigations and intelligence services in the tri-state area and beyond. And second is 360 Security Services, Minneapolis-based, but a global entity. Intelligence, investigations, cyber forensics, forensic accounting, a wide variety of services. Look them up, 360 Security Services. Right to business now. We don't keep a guest like this waiting. I did that last week on our call, and I was chastised for it. I was a little late. We are honored. We are so honored, all kidding aside, to have this morning's guest to be our first guest on Gold Shields. How do you introduce somebody who changed the profession? It's almost beyond words, and I will not belabor it, but to say a very simple fact that there are a lot of people alive today because of the work that this man and his team did. And we were a part of that, Tom, but his guidance, his leadership, his strategies changed New York City. Arguably, and probably not arguably for those of us on this podcast, the greatest city in the world that was dying on the vine. So I'm going to take you back to the 90s, but our guest today, without any further ado, was the chief of department, the highest ranking uniform member of the NYPD at the time, and one of the architects of CompStat and so many other strategies that helped bring New York City back. Please, we want to warmly welcome former chief, always be chief to me, Louis Anemone.
How are you, Chief?
Hey, good morning, Dan. Thank you for the great introduction. Good morning, Tom. Glad to be here with both of you.
We couldn't be more honored to have someone like you here. Both Dan and I served under you. We listened to your leadership, we listened to your ideas, and we put that into action. And because of those policies trickling down to the guys on the street, we were able to change New York City. And we changed New York City because of you, the team you were involved in. And we're going to throw some numbers out later in this interview that are mind-blowing, from what you walked into to what you left. The numbers are staggering, and we can't wait to get to it. So just thank you so much for being here and giving us the opportunity, boss.
Yeah.
Listen, fellas, it's my pleasure to be here. And I don't think that in today's environment, there's anything more important for us to be discussing than policing. Right? Policing today in the city, in the country, really. Mm-hmm. This is a top of the list topic. It's a service that you're providing for the public and for cops everywhere, really, to start speaking about this publicly.
You know, you're absolutely correct, Chief. And if you look at one only has to look at the news every day to see the staggering increase in violent crime across this country. And it's not just an increase in violent crime. There's always been violent crime. It's a failure by leadership. And I think you'll agree with me. In many municipalities and government agencies across this country, to back their cops, to withhold the law, to uphold the law, to prosecute criminals, and to really put together smart strategies to do something about the problem that's growing. And people are dying because of it. This is very real stuff. So we're having you on today, and there's a lot of reasons. One, we've always been in awe of the work that you helped put in place. You were a significant part of it, but also because the world does need, I know our audience needs to help know that there is a way to do it better, and you did it better. And we really want you to share some of that insider baseball, so to speak, about that with us today. And I know you've agreed to do that, so thank you in advance. Tom, you had a couple of questions you wanted to kick off with that I think would be a good place to start and jump right in. How about that?
Yeah, boss, why don't you take us through the beginning parts of your career? Just getting on what you had to endure is totally different than what's going on today, especially through the 70s, where police were even targeted more back then than they are now. I mean, you actually had one political group publicly saying they were coming after you. How did going to work every day affect your life? How'd you deal with it? And I know in the mid 70s, 73 to 77, I believe you were sergeant at 3-2, which was the hub of problems going on. Take us through those days of going to work.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to skip over the police trainee years. I joined the department as a trainee in December '64.
Mm-hmm.
I went through the academy with a class of probationary patrolmen. There were 14 of us in this trainee class. And when I turned 21 in March of '67, I was sworn in and given 2 weeks of firearms training. That was the only thing we hadn't done as trainees. So I did my 9 months probation in Blues in the 6-0 precinct, where I was first assigned. I worked there for 3 years or so. I lived in the 6-2. This was an easy commute. It was nice. It was a busy place back then. This is prior to a lot of the city projects that went up. So you had a lot of bungalows, a lot of families there for years.
Coney Island area.
But we had our crime.
Yep.
Yeah. So the precinct had the distinction of being 3 blocks wide and 6.5 miles long.
Oh.
We had the beach from Manhattan Beach to Brighton Beach to Coney Island. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine busy in the summer, really busy in the summer. And back then, you'd get busloads of people that would visit Coney Island from Philadelphia, from Newark, from places in the metropolitan area. And sometimes, they'd run into issues with local folks from Brooklyn or from other places in the city. So you had to be on your toes. Your head had to be on a swivel. And, those first few years, I learned a lot. It was, this is prior, guys, to specialization. We had detectives and you had patrolmen. Right. There was nothing else, So we were 25,000 strong. Most of us were wearing a uniform, working around the clock. Mm-hmm. And that's where I learned the job. Mm-hmm. The 6-0 wasn't unique because we had cops there who had 25 years in 1967, 30 years. We had World War II veterans, Korean War veterans, still humping their radio car around the clock. Mm-hmm. 5 midnights, 5 4-12s, 5-day tours, and mm-hmm. back again the following week. Wow. So the older guys were still there. And you learned a lot from them. There's a lot of talk about, some of these old folks and their ways and maybe their corrupt ways, but they knew how to speak to people. Mm-hmm. I learned how to talk to people. I had a Catholic school education, but when I hit the street, I didn't know what to say to anyone. Mm-hmm. These guys taught me, you never walk by someone without saying, hey, hi. Mm-hmm. Or if you had a post with a commercial, you opened the door, you walked in. Hey, I'm Officer Lou. I've got the post today. Everything okay? And from there, it just, blossomed. I moved upstate after we got married. So in 1970, I was transferred to the 3-4. A nice place, a good place. And after and it was undergoing change. The neighborhood was changing. It had been Jewish and Irish for years and some Cubans and Greeks. And now it was changing. A lot of Dominicans were moving into the neighborhood. My partner and I up there, were selected for this new idea of precinct anti-crime, working in plain clothes as a pilot project to see if you could catch bad guys in the process of robbing stores or people or purse snatchers. And we were pretty successful at that. The pilot project went on to become the citywide anti-crime unit. And we were one of the charter members of that unit, 300 cops from throughout the city. So I was there in citywide anti-crime back in December 71 until I got promoted to sergeant June of 73. So during those years, we had the assassinations of Piagentini and Jones in the 3-2. Forster and Laurie, we were working there that night in the 13th precinct. The night, by the way, tomorrow is 51 years since they were assassinated in the 9th precinct. So you had that BLA really taking off, killing cops, shooting cops, ambushing cops. In the citywide anti-crime unit, it got bad, so bad that they had us backing up radio cars in selected precincts in the city where they thought, the cops might be at risk. We'd follow in the unmarked car with the shotguns as they responded to jobs throughout the precinct. Each one of our units was given a sector to back up.
So you were the bodyguards for the patrol guys. Wow.
Yeah. It was, crazy times. So that was that. I went to the 3-2 as a sergeant in June of 73. I got there on June 8th. On Father's Day, June 17th, Ralph Stanchi was shot and killed in the Capri Lounge across the street from Harlem Hospital. So, you're learning fast. You're seeing stuff, maybe that other departments you're not going to see in 20 or 30 years. You're seeing a lot of this stuff happening in the 3-2 and the 2-8 back in those days. You live, you learn, you try to teach the cops in your squad, right? Anything that you might have learned, whether it's tactical or it's a safety idea or it's a way to speak to people, in the street to kind of get them on your side. In the early days, in the 6.0 and early on in the 3-4, we didn't have all those portable radios. So, you're kind of relying on yourself. You're walking a post by yourself. You want to make sure you have some friends out on the street. Treat people right so that someday you may need their help. But you don't want to treat people wrong because besides it being, the wrong thing to do, to administer a beating or something to somebody that looks at you crossways, you're making it bad for the next cop who runs across that person. We don't want that guy to think when the next cop stops and, I'm going to get a beating, so I may as well, shoot first, stab first. We taught our cops as best we could. We lost Bruce Anderson, but it was on a radio car collision. 1974, September 74, 2 radio cars collided, responding to a shots fired job over the air put on by another unit that was taking fire up on 8th Avenue. That was a tough time. Cops were good. They were solid, backing each other up, and they were willing to learn. That's some of my best years in the job back then.
Those are busy places that you worked. You mentioned the 3-2 precinct. It's one of those places that very humbling to walk into as a young cop and to look behind the desk and see all the plaques of the deceased members of the service who died in the line of duty in that command. And some police precincts in New York City have more than others. 3-2 has more than its share. The 9th has more than its share. The 2-8. Very humbling indeed. Reminds you just took a job that's dangerous. You could not go home tonight, and it's, as part of the course of action of your job, you can be killed.
Yeah.
So, boss, during your career, at what point did you think about the next test and the next promotion and where you wanted to be in this job? Your love for the job is evident, and your willingness to pass on, your experience and what you know is also evident. So how did that come about? Just taking, the promotional test and continuing to go up in the ranks?
Yeah. So I was fortunate. My wife understood a little bit about the job. We had long discussions before we got married. She said, "I'd like to see you, apply yourself to the exams." I said, "Okay, I would." So I took the sergeant's exam. Back then, you needed 2 years on the job. They gave the exam in April of '69. I was a cop in March of '67, so I just made I was able to take the test. Because of my police trainee experience, I knew a lot of the answers. What I didn't have was any seniority, so I was somewhere in the middle of the list, but I did get promoted to sergeant. While I was in the academy for that Command E course, the sergeant's training course, one of the instructors told us, "Hey, you guys are lucky. There's going to be a lieutenant's exam in November." We were in the class in June. He says, "Just continue your studying." It was the best advice, I had. So I studied from June till November, passed the lieutenant's exam. You had to wait 3 years to get promoted because then you had layoffs and fiscal difficulties. But I did pass the lieutenant's exam. I made it in November of '77, and there was a captain's exam shortly after. Again, without a whole lot of studying, because I was already, up to my ears in books, book learning. I took that test, and again, ended up somewhere in the middle. And in 1982, August of '82, I was promoted and went back to the 3-2 precinct. Now as the executive officer.
Wow.
So a lot of the cops that were still there from my days, 5 years earlier.
Wow. And I remember you as a captain. I mentioned this too, I think last week when we chatted. I was one of the young rookies that was assigned right out of the NSU training unit up to the 2-0 precinct in January of 1985. And you were the CO at the time. And I remember, being in awe of the whole police work thing still. And I brought a robbery collar off Broadway in one night. And I was always looking for a collar. I just came from Brooklyn North training. And I'm in the 2-0, and I was like, it's not the same. It's a little different. I was itching. Well, I kind of got my wish because, not that I didn't want to work for you, boss, but about a month and a half later, the borough looked and they said, "Wait a minute, we just sent 30 cops to the 2-0 precinct on the west side of Manhattan. They don't need 30 cops. The 3-0 needs 20 cops." So they shipped a bunch of us up into 151st Street, and it was a great move actually, because I was able to get the activity I was looking for at that point in my career. But I remember you. You were, you're a captain. You were in charge, and it was interesting to be in your command at that time and look back now and see how you took from that point in '84. It wasn't long. You were moving. You were moving up the ranks, and you were making an impression upon the job. So, if you want to continue with us there after captain, what happened with you?
I'm not sure I agree with your characterization of moving up the ranks, but I will tell you, I had at the 2-0, I was assigned 102 cops. I made a friggin' stink to the borough commander, and I think that's what happened. He told somebody downtown, the guy can hardly run the place. You need more than that just to open the doors to the precinct. So for a short while, I had the 30 cops. I liked the 2-0. The 2-0 was a neighborhood under change then. It was undergoing gentrification. So you had some of the old timers and the new folks, those kind of quality of life disputes. But it had its share of crime. It was the crown jewel, really, of Manhattan North. You had Lincoln Center there. They were very, very jealous that, the police protection should be there at Lincoln Center. You had a couple of high schools in the precinct. We had Brandeis, we had Martin Luther King, and you had the school for the movie Fame.
Performing arts.
Guardia, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, performing arts. So, you had a lot with the youth. Different things to learn. 2 years there, and I went to I got the 3-2. My third time back to the 3-2. This time as the commanding officer. I was there for 3 years, from '86 to '89.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, fellas, during those 3 years, we're talking the 3-2 precinct, at the height of the crack
Mm-hmm.
cocaine epidemic and the wars throughout the city, my cops never fired a shot in anger during those 3 years. They shot dogs,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, pit bulls here, there, and everywhere, but never a shot at a person. And I was damn proud of it. Al Matarazzo took over after me,
Mm-hmm.
and he continued that streak for 2 years. So that was a total of like 5 or 6 years where they hadn't, and they were making collars, but they didn't fire their guns. When people talk about, police and they're trying to kill people, that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
That really wasn't the case. I was so damn proud of them up there.
Well, you should be.
Tough place.
Yeah. You should be proud of them, because that's quite an accomplishment. Most of the people on this may or may not have any idea of the time that we're talking about and the place that we're talking about. But at that point in time, I was in patrol in Manhattan North in the 3-0 and then in the task force working in the 3-4 basically every night. And it was a time that was riddled with violent crime everywhere, bodies being shot, drug robberies, turf wars. It was very difficult almost to be an active cop and to not be engaged in gunfire. And for the cops in the 3-2 to show that level of professionalism, restraint, tactics, it is absolutely commendable. But as we all know, nothing starts at the bottom. Everything starts at the top and rolls down. And the way that the cops act is a testament to how the CO sets the tone for an expectation for the command. So that's a feather in your hat, Chief. You ran a command that was busy, did the job, and managed to do it without unnecessary uses of excessive, what could be deemed excessive force by many. But I'm just glad you didn't have anybody killed either in that period too, which is important. You're a CO, you're responsible for your people, right? And you want your people to go home safely. And you managed to do that in a tough time. Those shits were bad back then. Crack destroyed America, but a lot of it started up where we were, in that area of the world.
It did.
Yep.
So I did a year and a half in Manhattan North narcotics from '82 to '84 before I went to the 2-0. As I was leaving, I heard for the first time, the very first time in New York City, the word crack.
Mm-hmm.
We were reading about it on the West Coast and rock houses, and they were using tanks to knock down some of these fortified locations in LA. We hadn't seen it yet.
Mm-hmm.
But from '84 to into the early '90s, boy, it exploded in New York.
It sure did.
Yep.
Me coming in 1990 was right in the middle of that. So we came in with a, dream and aspirations of doing your job and going out there and locking everybody up. And 1990 and 91, when we actually graduated, was a tough time in New York City with the NYPD. We didn't know if there was a lot of backing. Crime was absolutely out of control. And we're walking into a situation right out of the academy, and me being assigned to the 3-0 was one of the busiest places in the city at the time. And you remember the feeling of the cops back then of, do we do our job? Probably a little similar to what's today. Do we do our job? Are we going to get the backing? Where's the direction? And that was a lot of questions that were going on during that time frame. And then 1993, 94 pops up. And the team that's getting assembled, probably in the back rooms of 1PP and a couple other places, is starting to get talked about. And your name is in the middle of that. Take us through those 1993, probably 94, of discussions of who's going to be where with the upcoming election that was coming, the mayoral election. And how did the names that come up, and we'll bring them up, how did that all come about? Take us through those times.
So What I can tell you is what I was doing in '93. Ray Kelly promoted me in January '93 to deputy chief and gave me the job of disorder control.
Mm-hmm.
We had the Crown Heights riots. The governor had a investigatory commission. Richard Giorgenti was the lead on it to investigate the reasons for and the performance of the NYPD. So I spent '93 creating new tactics, new procedures, new equipment, and new training. Guys, I was training cops all over the city, 5 days a week, including the midnights, to get everybody on board with the new mobilization plan, which we also created, et cetera. So I did that all year. Towards the end of the year, after the election, Bratton was named to be the new police commissioner. And he sent out a directive through the Office of Management Analysis and Planning. Everybody at the rank of deputy chief, send him a 3 or 4 or 5 page paper on what it is you're doing, how long you've been assigned there, what are your results, what are you looking to do, what are your goals, etc. So I didn't do any of that. I gave him a short little 49 paragraph. I attached a video showing what we were doing. And part of that video was Brooklyn North underneath the L along Broadway as a result of the blackout riots in 1977. That was kind of a centerpiece of that. And here's what we're doing now. We're trying to prevent that from happening again. Here's some of the people that are involved on the team. And this is what we've been doing. So apparently that was my own interview, because after that I got a call, after Bratton took office, come down to Police Plaza. I came down. Everyone's telling me, he's going to interview you. I'm sitting in an outer room up on the 14th floor with Rafael Pinheiro, who was also a deputy chief, myself, Mike Julian, another deputy chief, and Charlie Gunter. I don't know, not Charlie, I'm sorry. Ruther, Charlie Ruther. I don't know if any of you guys ever.
Oh, yeah.
With Ruther. So, and Marty O'Boyle. So, I was called in, and I find Bratton and Timoney in there sitting on the couch. I sit down, and Bratton says, "Congratulations, you're the new chief of patrol." I didn't have an interview. There was no interview. We sat down, and, he starts talking to me about what are you going to do, et cetera, et cetera. So I find out later that, he asked Timoney, who are we going to, make the chief of patrol? And he suggested the current chief of patrol, Mario Salvaggi, who was a mentor to me. And Bratton said, no, he's with the old guard. They're going. He's not staying. Who else could you come up with? He says, the best guy I know for the street would be Louis Anemone, but he's crazy. So Bratton took a shot on crazy Louis. It made me
Oh, my God, that is funny. I didn't want to say it, but that word has been associated with your name for many years. It's no secret that you had that reputation, but can I say it was probably for the best of reasons? You were very aggressive on the street.
Well earned.
Yeah.
Well earned. So listen, I know that Jack Maple and Bratton were meeting with a couple of private consultants up in Boston, going over the names and going over these reports. I wasn't part of any of that. And again, I never had my interview. I just got the job. So I'm meeting him for the first time. I met Maple for the first time, that day or, soon after. It was a great team, though. They put together a great team. Of course, when you're a one-star chief and you're jumping all the assistant chiefs, and now a 3-star chief, there was a little pushback in those early years. Some of those older guys weren't happy. I imagine I would have felt the same. But I told them, a lot of them didn't believe it, I have no agenda. I want to do my job. I'm in a position now as chief of patrol to affect this city and this department. We can do some things here because Bratton, told me he wanted to reduce crime, one, improve the quality of life in the communities. So those are 2 jobs I can do, and reduce the fear of crime. And I told him, I said, I'm not sure I know how to do that. He says, you do the first 2, and the third will take care of itself. He says, God, John Miller, going to get that word out. The good stories are going to be out there. And Lord, he was right. He's a good communicator. He had a good understanding of that. But again, just to correct some of the compliments I received earlier, I was a lot of the plans and the ideas came from Jack Maple. I may have had an idea here or there along the way, but I agreed with him. We worked together on smoothing off the rough edges on some of these plans. But I was the guy because I had the uniform who could ramrod this stuff through, who could get people to do it, to buy into it. Cops knew me, and they came to know me all over the city, but certainly in Manhattan,
Yes, we did.
So I had an opportunity, and I had the rank and the position to speak to people. We visited station houses all over the city. I give Bratton credit for doing it. Day tours, 4 to 12s, midnights. We were there talking the talk and walking the walk. And we had some great cops. What I take away from that whole time, guys, is that there was an untapped reservoir within the PD of people wanting to do the right thing. All they needed was someone to tell them it's okay. You can be the police. You can go out there and do your job. The community wants it. Your leadership wants it. Just go out and do it now.
And that's what we needed.
What a pleasure.
You and that team reinvigorated thousands and thousands of police officers on the street who were kind of floundering with the job in the early 90s and not really knowing the direction we were going in. You ignited a fire in young cops, in cops who've been on the job for a while. Exactly what you just said. Go do your job. And that's all we were ever looking for. I think all of us, the 3 of us, got on the job to do just that. So when you have the leadership now,
had it into the heart.
Yep.
So when you have the leadership backing you and the cops knowing they're backing you, it's very easy to go do your job. And I just want to give a little insight to the people listening, what you were up against. Okay. In 1993, the year before you got in, you got everything in, New York City had 2,420 homicides, which is insane to think about. You had 5,000 rapes. You had 102,000 robberies in 1 year and 85,000 assaults. That's what you guys are walking into and getting asked, okay, go fix it. And you did.
Yeah. And over 100,000 stolen cars. Tom.
Oh, yeah.
Over 100,000 stolen cars.
And you look at the numbers from 93 or 94 on, they dramatically go down every single year.
Yeah.
And it's because of the policies and you allowing the police officers to do their job. And I told this to Danny earlier, you didn't just invigorate the police officers in the city, you ignited the citizens of New York City. In the 80s, anyone who's from here knows exactly what I'm saying. In the mid 70s and 80s, you didn't take your family on a stroll through Central Park. You didn't walk through Times Square, and you sure as heck didn't get on a subway. And the numbers and policies that you put into place in those first couple of years ignited the city and its citizens to go do that again with their families. And they owe you just as much a thanks as the members of the NYPD do.
Well, I didn't do it by myself, fellas. We needed every man and woman in the department.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the detective division did more and better work during those years than they had ever before.
Mm-hmm.
They were solving cases left, right, and center. And, if it ran into overtime, go ahead. You've got the green light. Do what you have to do. There were no artificial restraints,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to refer to it as. You mentioned 89, 90, 91, 92. We had a different mayor back then, right? You had David Dinkins.
Mm-hmm.
You had instances, so you had the Crown Heights riots, which were a fiasco until finally, they were throwing bottles and bricks at him. After 3 days of that,
Mm-hmm.
after cops getting shot with a shotgun, on the third night, the mayor decided he had had enough. Fix it. So it took us then. We were back there the next day, one night, to straighten that thing out.
Mm-hmm.
You had that. Then you had the Washington Heights,
Mm-hmm.
Kiko Garcia bullshit,
Right.
where he ended up paying. He had the city pay for the body of this drug dealer that was giving. They were trying to frame Mike O'Keefe for
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yes.
Right. You had that, and then you had that Korean grocery boycott in Brooklyn, where the Koreans went to court and got a court order to, prevent these Sharpton and his folks from surrounding the store and preventing people from shopping. And the police department wouldn't enforce the court order.
Ugh.
They let him, in the face of a court order, they let him stay there and do his stuff despite a court order. You talk about a lack of leadership in the department, people wondering, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We're the police. How do we stand by for this? It was crazy, crazy time.
Chief, one of the things that I always remember about you is whenever there was any kind of chaos or any kind of event, whether it be outside a rap concert at the Garden or New Year's Eve or, Times Square or West Indian Day Parade, Eastern Parkway, when you were involved in the leadership of it, and especially when you took over as chief of patrol and then chief of department, it was all of a sudden a very different event. If the permit said it ended at 5, you were out of there at 5 o'clock. You pulled the plug. That's it. You have till 5 o'clock to have your constitutionally protected right to protest or gather, and you're covered for that. And at 5 o'clock, we're out of here. You're out of here. Goodbye. That never happened before, because I remember watching the West Indian Day Parade go around and round and round with those big trucks with the speakers on it. And cops are standing out there 12, 14, 16 hours. And nothing good happens from a full day of partying into the wee hours, as we know. Times Square it became a riot at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was crazy, the stuff that was going on down there. You changed so many things by simply saying enough is enough. We're going to be a leader. We're going to say and do what's right. And that really, for those of us like Tom and I, we still talk about how great it was to have leadership that actually led by example, that said, we're going to do it. This is how it's going to go. You can go to the bank on this. So that meant a lot to us. So thank you for that.
So let me, again, I'm talking to two former detectives. I'm hoping there are former detectives listening as well, and current detectives. 1993, we're doing the disorder control training, and I told the team we're going to go out to the West Indian Day Parade. We're going to, but we're staying, for the nighttime. We're going to watch this thing all day and see what's going to take notes and see what we can fix. So we went out there. So the series of shootings start: 7-7, 7-1, 7-0, 7-7, 7-0, 7-1. So at some point I said, get over to the squad over in the 7-1. Let's find out, what are they doing? What's going on here? And there's one detective in the squad room answering the phone. It was the same in the 7-7, same in the 7-0, same in the 6-7. All of those. I said, where's the rest of the teams? They're in uniform. working the parade. I said, what? I went out, and sure enough, here's a group of them on the median and on Eastern Parkway. All the detectives on overtime and straight time, all mixed in together, sitting there in uniform, nobody chasing down any of these leads on. So that was one of the first things we changed the following years. If you need additional cops, you're not taking them from the squads. The squad, especially out there, we need those guys and gals working. These shootings or the robberies, how the heck?
Yeah.
That was a crazy, they thought they were just fungible. Whoever was making these plans, it's a body. They start talking about bodies. I need bodies. But there's a cost. There's an operational cost when you do something like that.
Right.
You don't have that guy or that gal up in the squad room ready to go out and follow a lead. I just had to get that out.
No, that's great. And, we can talk a lot about the West Indian Day Parade all day long, honestly, because it was such a different event then as it is now. And all the good people that went there for the right reason, I used to feel bad for them because the city's leadership kind of threw its hands up at the time. I remember my first one in the summer of 1984. I was a rookie in Brooklyn North, and we get sent over to report to the 7-7 precinct, and we're mustering outside. And lieutenant who had the desk for the night had a microphone, and he said, last year I had the desk on the 4 to 12 during the parade, and I had 4 arrests. And the only reason I had 4 arrests that I allowed in was because we had 4 toe tags. If you don't have a homicide, you don't have an arrest.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah. And that kind of leadership says anything goes. Do whatever you want as long as you don't kill somebody. And if you kill somebody, the squad's not even going to be able to set up a crime. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
It was hands off. It was crazy. And the people of the city of New York deserve better. The cops deserve better. It was a total failure.
I would agree.
And I think you addressed the failures that were out there when your team came up with CompStat. That thought process and that accountability shook the department and led the way for other departments all over this world to adapt that. It may be a different name, maybe a different agenda, but the premise of it was felt throughout the world. So let's hear the backstage pass to the CompStat talks of why, how did it start, what was the idea for it. We know the idea for it was the accountability, but let's hear it from you.
All right, so it was, this was all Jack Maple. He comes into my office early on. He says, Louis, what are we going to do about the robberies and homicides and the violence? I said, I'll put something together, and I did something quick. We put it together for Brooklyn North, as a matter of fact. We called it ART, Attack, Robberies, Combat, Homicides. Just the precincts in Brooklyn North. We had a short little meeting with them. This is the agenda. I'm leaving it up to, you commanders to get it done, and the borough commander to assist with the task force or whatever else he had. So we ran that for a couple of weeks. The numbers weren't all that impressive. Jack came back. He sits down, Louis, it's not working. He says, I showed Bratton these 4 steps, the 4 steps of CompStat as they came out, to be. Timely, accurate information, clearly communicated to all. Rapid deployment of forces that are controlled, coordinated. Effective tactics that are legal and moral. And finally, the last piece, which was the actual meeting itself, the assessment and follow-up, relentless assessment and follow-up.
Yep.
So that we did these meetings. And again, we left the 76 at the time, then later 77 precinct commanders free to figure it out, how to do it. But we told them we're going to be meeting with you, twice a week, so that in a month we had the entire city in. We had Manhattan North on Wednesday, Manhattan South on Friday. Following week, Brooklyn South, Brooklyn North, etc. So that in 4 weeks we saw the entire city. And this was, his idea, but he needed a partner at the meeting to drive it, to ask the questions. If he's lost in his thought, there had to be someone else there. The guys weren't all that enthused about it. I was. I says this is a germ of an idea that could take off. Mm-hmm. So I filled that role for him, and we really became partners in it. When he left in '96, broke my heart. But Eddie Norris stepped up, and he was, appointed to take that position, and he did a great job with it as well. It wasn't easy, but we had good people in the office who would stay late. And now Jack would show up. We'd get in, I guess, about 6 a.m. The meetings occurred at 7. And his idea was, let's have 3 hours, and then they can go and do their 10 to 6. I said, great. But we had to get in even a little earlier, 6 a.m. We didn't want the phones ringing during the meeting, 7 to 10, your phone is going to be ringing. So it was, twice a week. It was a lot of work. But he'd come in my office before every meeting, maybe 40 minutes before. We'd have a cup of coffee together. What do you think, Jack? His people would be looking at certain stuff. My people would be looking at certain stuff. And then we'd sit down and, decide, all right, I want to ask questions, the 6-0. I want to know what the 6-0 squad is doing with the drug homicides that are happening up there in the projects. And he might have had something from the 6-6 or the 6-8 or something. Okay, good. What about the squad? What questions do you have for the squad? What about transit? What about housing? Are you seeing any? And then we go in with more or less a back of your hand kind of a plan to ask the questions. Mm-hmm. And then depending on the answers, the meeting moved along. We took notes. If there was a request made or an order given, it was put in the notes. Next time those people came down, that'd be the first order of business. What'd you do about X, Y, and Z, the way you promised last time? Mm-hmm. And my mantra to them all was, listen, if it's not written, it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. I want to see a plan. I don't want to see you come here next time pointing the finger at narcotics because they didn't help. I want narcotics to be standing there with you, right. The squad commander with the precinct commander, mm-hmm. housing and transit. You handle this as a team. Mm-hmm. And the precinct commander should be the quarterback.
Yep. I tell you, it was right. Very interesting to watch. I had a slew of opportunities as a sergeant to attend to answer for my unit's activity in various areas. And I will admit that I never got grilled and beaten up, but you can view it as a beat up. But to those of us watching it, it's a very tense room because this is the real deal. There are real lives at stake in the city, and this is not a joke. And if you want to raise your hand and become a police officer and move your way up to captain and inspector and stuff, expect accountability. You're no longer hiding in your office. And it was really interesting to watch the commanders get up there, like you said, with the housing commanders, with the squad commander, with transit. That team approach is what makes the difference, the communication piece. You guys forced that out of a culture that was siloed far too long, and it wasn't helping anybody.
So the other nice thing about it was we had representatives, from every support office mm-hmm. in the department as well. So when a precinct commander would say, listen, I got my anti-crime on these burglaries, but we need a car, or we need binoculars, or we need night vision, I turn around and cut the red tape right there at the meeting. Mm-hmm. You see whoever was there from support services, get them an unmarked car. Oh, Chief, they're new. We're saving them. Save shit. Mm-hmm. He needs it now. Mm-hmm. Get it out there to him now.
Right.
Okay. Why doesn't he have the night vision? Well, they're give him the night vision. Mm-hmm. Let them use it. And then you tell the cap, make sure they take care of the, So we were a strange organization. By the way, it didn't change overnight.
No.
This was a freaking battle, a battle twice a week, every week. And, the thing, Jack knew it. I knew it. I don't know that everyone else knew it. Every once in a while, somebody that was, putting in his papers, the next day or the next week would, stand there and say something completely inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? And with a smile on his face because he didn't give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't looking. He didn't care. He could care one way or the other about his job and about servicing the city. So, but when you're in the position of chairing a meeting, you can't let it stand.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot let somebody get away because everyone else in that room, 100 people, I don't know how many were there, Dan, when you were at the
easy
meeting.
100, easy. Mm-hmm.
They're all taken away. They're watching and say, hey, this guy is selling wolf tickets to the chief
Mm-hmm.
or to the deputy commissioner. Look at this. They're buying those tickets. It's okay to say, oh, it's hard work. It's okay to say, oh, he's uncooperative. Bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not okay. You think
Right.
that's hard, so you had to be on your toes all the time, on your game, and not let anyone get a bad message out there that the rest of them think, hey, that's an excuse now. I can use that, when I'm here next week or next
Right.
month.
A couple of interesting things about CompStat, my observations, there was always visitors, and those visitors were from everything from academia to police and governmental agencies from all over the world, because the word got out that this is a trailblazing, revolutionary way to police, and nothing succeeds like success. And we had enormous success with that accountability and CompStat process. So people wanted to see it. It was fascinating, and you could travel. And I had the opportunity to travel in my career at various places, and people would always ask, "Oh, what's it like in the command and control center?" Or if you run into somebody that's been through the FBI academy, they're like, "Oh my!" The most impactful thing they remember is that eighth floor visit to the command and control center to watch a CompStat. They're like, "Oh, unbelievable!" But it worked. It was so new, such a new way of looking. And like you said, the NYPD was a culture that, it's like turning the Titanic around in the sink. It took a while. It took some drastic change. And it wasn't easy. And I'm sure a lot of egos were bruised and a lot of people walked out of there unhappy. But at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in get over yourself. What's the goal? You raise your hand, you take the oath, you wear the badge. It's to protect the people of the city of New York, period. It's not about you and how cool you look in uniform or your ego. It's about doing the job. So that was a real culture change, a shock, like you said, in the NYPD.
Yeah.
And you always knew if you walked into the command, what command was up that week. You walked in and saw everyone running around like maniacs with papers and reports and summonses, and oh, all right, we're up next week.
Yeah, and the thing of it is there is no way in heck myself or Jack should know more about the 7-5 robbery patterns than the precinct commander or the squad commander. They're out there in the field. We're just looking to give you an opportunity to prove to us that you understand it, that you've recognized it, that you have a plan that you're working on to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Over those 5.5 years of doing CompStat, I got to tell you, some people lost their command. Some people were, moved over sideways. But I saw and was able to promote more good, solid people at all ranks,
mm-hmm.
sergeants, lieutenants, captains, inspectors, watching them perform at these meetings, seeing that they had it in their heart and they had it up in their head,
mm-hmm.
how to do it, what to do. It's a blessing. I was a young sergeant. I was a young lieutenant. I never spoke to Chief Johnston.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I did as a young captain because he wanted to yell at me. I had to go down and plead for mercy in his office. But I'm being exposed twice a week to young supervisors and some of them impress the heck out of you.
Mm-hmm.
You turn around and you tell the commissioner, hey, this is one we got to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm.
This is somebody that deserves, more challenging assignment in the future, or a bump in pay, or whatever we can do
mm-hmm.
for them. So it was a two-edged. You might have lost your command,
mm-hmm.
but also a lot of people benefited by it.
Mhm.
That's amazing.
Tom,
And I know the city did.
Tom, you were relaying your numbers before, and some of those are impressive in terms of the sheer volume. But did you get a chance to? Let's go into what it went down to.
Uh, well, you left in '99, boss. Okay.
Yes.
So we rattled off some numbers from '93 and '94 when you first got on. Now I'm going to blow everyone's mind with what the numbers went down to the year you left. Okay. So at the height of New York, in '93, 2,420 homicides. In 1999, 903. That's absurd. I mean, that's earth shattering.
Mm-hmm.
You went from 5,000 rapes to 3,000, 102 robberies to 43,000, and 85,000 assaults to 58,000. Now, those numbers for some of our listeners may be, oh my God, how does that happen? That amount of crime. But you're talking about a city of 8.4 million people. Those numbers to go down to the hundreds after being in the almost 3,000 changes a department forever, and it changes a city forever. And that's what you and your team did.
Yeah. So listen,
go ahead.
Dan and Tom, you were all part of that team.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not forget that. But so each of those numbers, guys, and I know you know this, but I want our listeners also to understand, every one of those numbers is a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Every one of those human beings has family, friends, neighbors that are impacted by that person's victimization.
That's right.
They hear about it, they talk about it, right? They feel fear themselves. So it was always, we use that as the bottom line to see how we were doing. The bottom line in police work is less numbers, not more sales. The opposite. We're looking for less.
Right.
Less homicides, less robberies. But for every one of those, there's a multiplier effect of bad and good. If you can prevent one, that's a whole lot of people that are going to be alive each and every year after that, right?
One of the interesting pieces of this whole program was the broken windows theory that's still spoken about. I know that there's more than a share of colleges out there that have police science and criminal justice programs and public safety programs that discuss it and discuss the success of it. There's plenty of people who are against it. They feel it's kind of harassment, but I think we can all agree that at the beginning of the 90s, New York City, the quality of life had gone down so much, and so much of that has to do with the quality of life offenses that people routinely felt completely free to commit. Urinating on the street, smoking marijuana on the street, drinking, or breaking bottles, you name it. All manner of littering even was completely accepted. I grew up as a kid on subways that you couldn't see out the windows from the graffiti. You couldn't walk on the floor without walking over a newspaper. People read the paper and dropped it. It was a culture in New York City that had to change. It wasn't just the cops, it was people. And by enforcing the quality of life stuff, you really do make an impact on a neighborhood, and then you follow that up with aggressive policing, whether it be the street crime unit, narcotics, directed patrol sort of things. There's a variety of tools in the toolbox that made all these numbers happen. But the quality of life offenses I saw firsthand, and Tom did too, we saw the difference in an area when those were being routinely enforced. If teams are going out with the focus of stopping this, and whenever you saw something, don't pass it by. Do something about it. You have summonses in your book, bring the person in. How many warrants were cleared? How many people were arrested that were wanted for robberies and homicides and shootings, who were carrying guns? You name it. All that kind of stuff comes into play, because this may be a surprise to some people who don't understand policing, but a guy that jumps a turnstile is also a guy, or a guy that shoots somebody is also a guy that doesn't pay his fare on the subway, doesn't think twice about drinking on the street. I mean, it doesn't matter when you grab him, but grab him. And when you find out who he is, sometimes when you shake that tree, it's fascinating to see what fell out of it.
Yeah. So, we worked in an agency that had a lot of data. We knew who some of those wanted people were.
Mm-hmm.
We knew the hot spots in every precinct where drugs were being sold,
Mm-hmm.
where robberies were occurring, where shootings were occurring, where you'd get the 911 calls, 100 at a time or something, or in a month, 100 calls for the same location. So we had that information. We wanted our precinct commanders to do something about it. Take a look at it. See if there's something that you can do. Well, Chief, I'm not getting, we can't seem to catch him in the act of robbery. But what about the repeat calls for the street corner crap game that's occurring in the same area?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we grab these guys for that? So that it was an attack on the quality of life, but it was also an attack on bad guys when they were off duty.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't doing their robbery right then, but we could interact on our terms at our times of our choosing, rather than when they decided to go out and stick somebody up or shoot somebody. But we had good luck with that. The other piece of this, and I want to make sure again the listeners understand. I know Tom and Dan, you guys understand this. This quality of life enforcement is a tool on the officer's belt, but it's not, across the board. We wanted this focused on areas that were giving us problems,
Mm-hmm.
violent problems. So that when I worked in Coney Island, it was typical for people to sit on their stoop on these bungalows and drink, or play dominoes, and I'd walk by it. They weren't the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But where the tough guys were,
right,
that was the, and I'd give them zero leeway, right? We wanted zero leeway for the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
We had the information. We knew who they were, where they were, and we didn't want them treated with kid gloves.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to use every aspect of the law that we could. And then get them into the station house to identify them, even if they're getting only a ticket,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then get them upstairs to sit down and talk to a detective. Let them be debriefed. Because you may be working on a case, Tom or Dan, involving violence, and this guy may not be the perp, and that may not be the crime he did, but he may have valuable information for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
A detective sitting down and talking to these kids and, explaining the facts of life to them. We saw it work throughout the city. Good, solid police work.
Mm-hmm. And nobody knows more than a kid sitting on the street all day long. They hear everything. Even if they don't know it firsthand, they hear it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And sometimes that's the only lead you need, right?
You're right.
Just a direction to go look.
Mm-hmm.
And you would know the next step to take.
So when we spoke with you, Chief, you mentioned you wanted to challenge our audience. And I don't know if, Tom, if you have anything else you want to go over with the Chief before we get to this, but I think it's an important part of our discussion with him this morning.
No, I think the challenge time is up.
Yeah.
Okay. I promised on LinkedIn that there'd be a challenge. This is for, current members of the department and retired members of the department. I left the job in 1999, and I was disappointed in that I hadn't seen a couple of cases closed, cases that stuck with me over the years. And I thought when I walked into headquarters in 1994, I was going to be able to do something about these cases. The first one I want to mention is the detectives Joe Lynch and Ferdinand Socia from the bomb squad that were killed handling an IED at the World's Fair on July 4th of all days, 1940.
Mm-hmm.
That case has never been solved. I don't know that there's anyone out there listening now, but I had a detective, a confidential investigator in the squad, in my squad, in headquarters, working on this case. And, there were, at the time, there were a lot of leads. People thought it might have been an IRA because the bomb was planted in the British Pavilion at the World's Fair.
Mm-hmm.
Others thought it might have been the Brits themselves looking to kind of sway us to get into the war on their behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Others thought it was Germans. In any event, we lost two fine detectives in the prime of their life. Case has never been solved. My detective in my squad thought that there might have been something, and I've looked over the years, I've never seen anything in dispatches between governments that might have had a clue or something, that might have triggered this particular placing of the device at that time, on that day, in that location. So that's my, hang up on that unsolved cold case. But I wonder if there are detectives out there now, active and or retired, who have cold cases in their mind that have never been solved, that they'd like to talk about or see if they can solicit the public for information about those particular cases. I think your platform here is an ideal way to get that kind of a conversation going. You never know, the crowdsourcing of giving a detective a chance to explain the facts of the crime and, the stone walls that they met. This could be a real boost to the city, to the department. So there were other cases, that stuck with me. I just wanted to highlight that Lynch and Socha case. Again, two detectives dying, and we were never able to put closure on that case. Any thoughts, fellas?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for bringing that to our attention. I had heard about it years ago. And as we mentioned on our call last week, I did work in the Major Case Squad, which was formed in the early 70s as at least the primary focus was the shootings and assassinations of police officers to help coordinate it citywide for the NYPD. And it was still within our purview when I was there, and still is, to assist on every shooting, homicide of a police officer in New York. And each one of them, we take every homicide seriously in New York. It doesn't matter whether you're a cop or not. We throw everything at it. We want to solve it. Your life mattered. But when one of our own gets killed, there's a certain element of it's as though it's your family more so than a civilian you don't know. And you do really want to make sure we get justice for those cases. And it's rare that we don't. In this case, we did not get justice for these two detectives. But appealing to the audience and understanding human beings that somebody somewhere knows something about this. Somebody maybe on a deathbed spoke to a relative. Maybe there's a historian. Maybe there was somebody that worked for a federal agency in the intelligence capacity that knew something, like you mentioned the dispatches. Somebody somewhere knows something about this. And if we can put a final report into an ages-old case file with some certainty that this is what happened, and we can go speak to the grandchildren or great-grandchildren of these detectives and say, you know what? The department your father gave his life for, and the city he gave his life for, cared enough to never forget and to follow up relentlessly, like you said, Chief. I love that word because it is true. We are relentless. We will never forget the cases, and it can be a civilian. I don't care. The cases I still think about. But
Exactly.
Yep.
That's my point, Dan, too.
Right.
That, there are probably civilian victims that detectives are out there, stymied on those particular cases.
Right. So Tom and I talked about this. We are more than happy we're brand new. We're evolving as a podcast. And we love the idea that you're giving us now, which is to use it as a platform for investigators and or the public in general. We have a website. You can send us a message. If you're an investigator or used to be and you have a case that's weighing on you, or that you really want to help, we want to help you get that out to the public. We want to do it. So it's The Gold Shield Show, thegoldshieldshow.com. Please get in touch with us. Let us know what you're thinking. We want to use that. And if you know anything, or anybody knows anything about the bombings on July 4th, 1940 at the British Pavilion at the World's Fair in Flushing Meadow Park in Queens, New York, that killed Detectives Ferdinand Socha and Joseph Lynch of the NYPD Bomb Squad. If you know anything about that, let's use this as a forum to jog minds and memories and see if we can do something to put closure to cases, because people hurt. Families hurt for generations after things like this happen. So thank you, Chief, for bringing that to us. Tom, your thoughts on this as well. We talked about it earlier.
Yeah, we're going to put it out as much as we can. We're going to put it on the website. We can bring it up in other shows that we do. Let's get the public involved. Like you said, boss, and I'm a believer in this, someone knows something. Someone saw something. Someone heard something. That's the detective way. There's never a crime that takes place and no one sees or hears anything. It doesn't happen. And this is no different.
And this technology that you're using now reaches more people, or can reach more people than any detective ever could by knocking on doors.
And we're going to stay on it. This is going to be a commitment to you that we made to you last week, and we're going to make it right again now. This is a commitment to this show is going to continue to put this information out and other information.
So thank you. Thank you. Chief, any last words or thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with? You talked earlier about the timing of our discussion about the strategies that you were a central part of in the 90s in New York City that helped turn the city around, and the condition of a lot of big cities in America right now and how they need to revisit some of those. But any last thoughts for the audience before we thank you and we talk about next week?
Yeah. So what I'd like to say, Dan and Tom, is that it all comes down to, in the final analysis, leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You referenced it earlier. It's got to start at the top. So whether we're talking New York City, Nassau County, Los Angeles, we need police leaders to step up and accept responsibility for supporting the work of their men and women who are out there day in, day out, 24/7, 365. We need that leadership. And part of that leadership is, serving the community, fixing things, solving crimes, preventing crimes in the first instance is the best, best tactic of all.
Mm-hmm.
But we need more of that. The silence is deafening on support for cops coming from within the organization. The police departments throughout the country, organizations of police chiefs, et cetera, and unions. I want to hear more from them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I feel like I'm a voice crying in the wilderness. I want other people to be speaking about this, speaking to this, supporting their police, and this country will be fine if we get that done. We can't be concerned, that selfish concern about our careers. That can't be number one. That's got to take a step back. It's the service. We took the oath. It's service to the public and support for those cops that are doing the job. Thank you. Thank you both for this opportunity.
Well, we thank you for sure. Dan and I talked when we were getting the show together that we needed a leadoff hitter as our first guest. We needed a leadoff hitter, just like in baseball. Get on, set the table, and that's exactly what you just did for our show. You set the table for every other guest coming up and how this is going to run. And for someone who served under you, boss, for those years, I thank you for your leadership and your commitment and your belief that we could do the job that you wanted us to do. So thank you for everything, your career, and certainly joining us on the show.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And just know that you have an open invitation anytime. If you have any other thoughts or any other things you'd like to share with our audience, you have the gold card to come back on at any time, of course. And we really appreciate it. It's such a pleasure. If you would have told me 25 years ago I would ever have a conversation like this with you, I would have said you're a smoking crack. Get away from me, But
Here we are.
So we're going to wrap up for today with Chief Anemone. Again, we cannot thank you enough, Chief. It's been a great opportunity to talk to you. And next week, we'll have another great guest who we will be highlighting for you on social media and our website. Look for it. And we want to again thank our sponsors, TNR Investigations and 360 Security Services, who make an incredible tool called CHIRP, CHIRP 360. Look that up online, CHIRP 360. Tom, take us out.
So what we do every show, and we're going to continue to do, is have everyone remember fallen officers throughout this country, their families, their coworkers, and a little prayer for those going out every day, sacrificing themselves so everyone can be safe.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like Dan just said, we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you to Chief Anemone, and we will see you soon. Everyone, please stay safe. Thanks again.
Take care. Thank you.